Well, hello again. This is Brian Copeland. Welcome to another edition of Copeland's Corner. Very, very special edition of Copeland's Corner. This is our 200th podcast, our 200th episode of this podcast. We started a couple of weeks before the shutdown. We were actually doing it in a studio in San Francisco, and having the comics come in, and we did it for 2 weeks, and then the shutdown happened. We thought, well, guess we can't do that. And somebody, I think it was Charlene Goto, who is our engineer and co-executive producer, said, why don't we try doing it over Zoom? And that's how we've been doing it ever since. I don't know how many comics we've had on over the course of this 200 episodes, but at least 100, because comics make return appearances. But it's been a heck of a ride, and I want to thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching with the new edition of YouTube that we started, I guess about 6 months ago. We started doing the YouTube. By the way, like us, please. Please, we need likes on YouTube. Like us on YouTube. And if you're listening to us, go to your podcast provider and give us a 5-star review, because it helps people to find the show, as people have been finding us for 200 episodes. So we got a great show on top for you today. We're going to laugh. We're going to argue. We're going to learn some things. Here we go. All right, this is the part of the podcast that we call Headliners on the Headlines. Joining us this week, we got comics Eddie Brill. Mike Larsen is with us. Tom Sawyer, who's also one of the executive producers of the podcast. And I should mention, you guys are here on a special day. This is podcast number 200. This is the 200th show. We started 2 weeks 2 weeks before the shutdown, and it was an in-studio recording, and then we started doing it this way once we couldn't leave our homes. And we'll talk a little bit about 2020 a little bit later on. Right now, I want to start with this, and that is this ridiculous order that was issued on Monday by the White House that put a temporary freeze. I mean, did they even call it temporary freeze? I've got the exact.
I think it was 90 days.
Here. It was a temporary freeze on any federal expenditures or grants, so that they would have an opportunity to go through these programs and decide whether or not they are in line with the Trump agenda. In other words, money that might go to things that are woke. And as a result, you had something like 22 states attorney generals sue, a number of nonprofit organizations sue, because it would have affected everything from Medicaid to funding for public schools to Meals on Wheels. And also, it's like blatantly unconstitutional because, as Tom and I were discussing beforehand, it takes away the money, the power of the purse. Now, what I find interesting is that when you look at the people who benefited who benefit the most, the regions that benefit the most from federal funds in this country, they are red states. Red states are taker states. They get a lot more money in federal funding than they send to Washington in their taxes. So my question for you is this. When I saw what the effect was going to be, obviously I thought it was terrible. I mean, if in fact, I didn't expect it to stand, but if in fact it did stand, when I saw what the effect was going to be, at first, obviously I was horrified, but then part of me thought, you know what, based on who it's really going to hurt, it serves you right. We tried to warn you. We tried to tell you, yet you're voting against your own interest, yet it serves you right. Now, is that spiteful, or was there even like that much of that when you first heard this?
I think, that people don't care. They're swept up in this sort of hoopla, and that's what they care about. For me, there's 90 million people who didn't vote. And those, those are the people that I'm even more sad about. Because you're always going to get some freaks on the left and freaks on the right. It's an extremist world. And to be angry at these people, it doesn't matter. We just have to find ways to stand up for what's right in ourselves.
Well, how can you say that it doesn't matter when you're talking about, I mean, the policies that are going to be enacted, if in fact, for example, Kennedy, who is undergoing, today as we record this on Wednesday, is undergoing his Senate confirmation hearings to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and he's got no business in that job. He's got absolutely no business in that job.
And let
And
me just say that not that it doesn't matter, because it definitely matters. It all matters. It's just a repeat of the village idiot running the clown show that we had, before. And it's just, people who aren't good at what they do and don't belong in that office, especially the woman who was in charge of education the last time, and the little Southern boy who was I forget his name, Jefferson's, whatever his last name was.
Davis, I think it was.
Yeah, Jefferson Davis, right. He should have never had the office. But so it does matter. It's just, what can we do in a positive way? Because it just hurts too much to just only bathe in the negative.
All right, Mike, your
Well,
thoughts on this?
Yeah, unlike other previous Republicans where cruelty might have been a byproduct of their policies, in this case, it is the product. Cruelty is the thing that their people respond to. They love the fact that they are just, denying. I have a trans son is waiting for his passport. Now we find out he's not going to get a new passport because they've just for no reason at all, just because they can fuck with him. So even something like this, even though it doesn't stand, immediately there were Meals on Wheels programs that stopped rolling today. So whether it stands, it means there's people that just aren't eating today, and it's not a byproduct of fiscal responsibility. It is because it's cruel. And I think the people who vote for him, even the people who get these benefits, they love that. They just dig the fact that they're being cruel to people. And I don't know how you deal with that politically. That's not a political, that's just.
Also, I saw a post yesterday on social media with people who didn't believe that the order was issued that was issued.
Right.
I mean, you had, was it the Medicare portal that you were not able to get into? And you got people saying, oh, see, this is just the Democrats that, making hay out of nothing. It's just a glitch. It's just a technical glitch. No. And then there are people like posting where the statement that came out of the White House, yes, it's not working because of this.
Yeah.
Well, and I've seen, go ahead, Tom.
I've seen a number of reports on the media, especially one just recently, last night, from two principals in Tennessee, that a third of their funding for their school is federal, and they were freaking out. And they knew it was real because, they're the ones that someone's saying, hey, money might not be coming, or it might be held up for 90 days. Can you tolerate it? And they're like, and both of them were Trump voters, and both of them said, this isn't what we voted for. This is what a lot of people have been talking about since Trump got elected. It's the F around and find out. A lot of these people just went for the owning the libs part. Believe that that wokeism wasn't just a thing that we live in our major states. It's just called being kind and thoughtful,
and empathetic.
Right. They made it into like this anti thing, and weaponized it. And now these people who are paying the price. This is just the beginning. They're going to keep doing this stuff, and they don't care. That it's going to affect red states more than any place. And because of that, I truly believe that there will be a blue wave like you've never seen, possibly like you've never seen, but there will definitely be a very strong blue wave in the midterms.
Well, I like that we're going through this thing where throughout the election, they were like, why do you call us stupid? We're not stupid. And then since the swearing in, it's like, I didn't know he was going to really do that, or I don't even know what a Nazi salute looks like.
Well, I'll tell you a perfect example. There was a guy who posted something on Facebook within 2 weeks of the election when he read that Trump wants to dismantle the Department of Education, completely dismantle it. And the guy says, I'm a Trump voter, and wait a minute, I have a son who's got autism. And it is because of programs that are in place through the Department of Education that he is able to attend school, and it's able to, facilitate his ability to learn. And if they take away the Department of Education, that all goes away. What's my kid going to do? Trump can't really do that, can he? And there were like a million comments going, yes, idiot, he can. And we told you, we warned you. They say there are
Right.
people saying this is going to be the biggest "I told you so" in the history of the world.
Right, but should we focus on the "I told you so" more than what can we do to, combat it
Well, the
instead of
problem is there isn't a whole lot we can do. We don't control any single part of the government. So
Not a lever.
the only thing we're left for is to constantly remind people, and we can do it in the nicest way possible, that, hey, this is unfortunately what you voted for, that we were trying to explain to you what was going to happen. And we're not saying this to rub it in your face to say we were right, but man, this guy is dangerous, and he doesn't care about you. He never cared about you. He doesn't care about Make America Great because he bought those hats from China. He didn't buy them from America.
I didn't know that. Is that true?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
They were made in China.
We used to have him on Letterman all the time because he was a clown and he was a moron, and he was such a perfect guest for a comedy show. And
for Dave to mock.
Right. And he was so good at mocking him. So, he's a clown. And I like the movie, not documentary, the movie where it was mostly Roy Cohn and Trump, that should have been seen by everybody. And so people could see the kind of human that Trump is and how he learned from Roy Cohn how to be that kind of subhuman. And
the guy whispering in McCarthy's ear.
Yes.
This is the guy who even though he's been dead for 50 years, look at the effect that he still has on this country.
Where's my Roy Cohn? Is a whole documentary where Trump yelled out when no one was helping him to be evil. He's like, "Where's my Roy Cohn?"
And the fact that he completely disassociated himself from Roy Cohn when Roy Cohn was dying of AIDS.
Yeah,
of course.
So my positive take on all this is that this is a wake-up call for the Democrats to actually start coming across with a populist message and stop this mamby-pamby by the script, trying to put one leg in one pond and one leg in the other, and really go after a strong populist message and stop with the just being nice to everybody. Everybody doesn't deserve the same niceness, but at the same time, everybody deserves equal rights, and they deserve a fair shot at the table. And this is an opportunity for self-reflection for the Democratic Party.
I think this Democratic Party smart enough to be introspective.
Not currently.
It is not. The Democratic Party is not a thing that really exists when there's not elections going on. Yeah. It is an individual thing. And I've been involved with the Democratic Party for many, many years. It's about individual people. It's about people who are going to capture the imagination of Americans and start to be a voice. But the party as a whole, has, AOC in it, and, John Fetterman, who's a very conservative Democrat. It can't speak for the entire country.
Don Tester.
Yeah.
Right. And we,
So Mike,
and then also, Carlin had said, he said, we had a chance here. We were given this opportunity to create this world, and we blew it. We blew it. We had a chance. We dropped the ball. And that's because both the Republicans and more Republicans, but the Democrats, it's about money and about getting money and aligning with money and being like, one day a Republican is calling him Hitler or Mussolini, then the next day they're going to be his best friend, get a job, and then get fired and embarrassed. It's just the pattern that goes on. So instead of following this pattern, I think what Tom was saying was really great, is find a way to let people know in a positive way instead of, just like you suck. It doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't get us anywhere, but neither do facts. That's the problem. It's a cult.
Dude, I got to tell you this one. This is interesting. I was a friend of mine posted a thing. I didn't know. I thought these were her friends that were in the comments section, but she didn't know there was a privacy button when she posted something political. So all these people who she didn't know came in from other places. And I make it a point now never to name call. I'll let them do the name calling. I don't care. They'll try to name call and they don't know who I am and they don't know anything about me. They're not going to bother finding out. So it doesn't matter. So, but anyways, this dude would not even admit that Trump was convicted of a felon. He wouldn't even. He kept saying, "Where are you getting your news from? MSNBC? I suppose you drive in your car with your mask on when no one's in there, right? Lib, And it's like, dude, I'm just. This is the reality world we live in. This is a thing that happened. It's like me saying rain is wet. Trump is a convicted felon. He's an adjudicated and self-confessed sexual assaulter. That's reality. That's it. Stop there.
And we still don't. He didn't have at the trial at Georgia. He still didn't have all these other things that were
have the January 6th trial.
Yeah.
Well, that's of everything he's done so far, and there's so many, and a lot of it too. Like a lot of Democrats since the election. I have stayed away from most of it. I'm watching maybe an hour a day. I'm not watching news 24/7 like I have been doing. I'm not reading 10 news or political websites a day. So because otherwise, I'm not going to have my hair on fire for 4 years like I did the last time. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to let him live rent free in my head for 4 years. It's not going to happen. But probably, I think so far the worst thing he did was letting those 1,600 violent criminals out of prison. How in the hell can he claim that he is the president of law and order and that the Republican Party is the party of law and order when, number one, he was not held accountable for a single solitary thing? Even things such as being held in contempt of court. How many times could any of the four of us be held in contempt of court and not go to jail, let alone 10 times? And then to let 1,600 people out, including those who injured police officers.
Yeah.
It boggles them. I guess my question is, where is the outrage? Where's the outrage?
But has Law and Order ever meant Law and Order?
Right.
That was George Wallace and Richard Nixon were all about Law and Order.
That's a good point.
It's about white people. That's what Law and Order means. When you're Law and Order, it's like, all right, good. We're getting some more shit. Good.
Well, once George Wallace got shot, then it became
it's the same thing for Christians. Christians are basically bowing the knee and saying this guy is the chosen one, who is so antichrist. It's unbelievable. He is the poster boy for each of the 7 deadly sins. He is amazing how just anti-Christ he is, and yet the Christians love him. They think he is next to Jesus.
Crazy. Have you seen the picture? Have you seen that picture of him in church where he's praying?
Oh yeah,
and it's got 6 fingers on one hand. It's got 6 fingers on one hand.
And then you have that picture of the Speaker of the House, angry, the supposedly the most Christian guy on the planet, looking at the woman who really was the preacher who was the most Christian, by law. Right. Just the anger of the opposite of the two of them, and it's just it's a lot of buzzwords and a lot of like I was watching today earlier. Bill Burr was talking about really smartly about what's going on and how the Republicans suck and all this kind of stuff. And then the Republican people were all the buzzwords like his wife's a liberal, his this, he's become a bad comedian, he's he's feeding people the garbage that they want. So really we have to continue to feed the good stuff to the rest of the world and not scream at them. It's like people are coming at us, so instead of coming back, we just let them come, and then we come back and bring the positivity.
Okay, but how do we spend that, Eddie? How do we spread this when first of all, aside from the fact that the legacy media is all right wing owned for the most part, you now have social media and you've got Twitter, you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got Amazon, that are all run by either Trump loyalists or people who have come on bended knee to Trump, who are basically going to allow their services to be used to spread propaganda. How do you get the truth to people when the truth is not going to be easily accessible to people. I mean, we're all old enough to remember when you could turn on. I'm going to age myself. I was a little kid, but I remember Walter Cronkite being on. It's sitting on the floor watching. You never doubted what Walter Cronkite said. You never did,
because it was the news.
It was the news.
It didn't come with it didn't come with a baggage. It was just the news. This is
maybe John Chancellor would come on and give his opinion for a minute, but that was it. There wasn't 24-hour news, and it wasn't a bunch of people creating opinions. It was mostly the news, and we don't have that anymore.
But also, what is the idea of? I mean, truth. You talk about a guy like Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson believes in the rapture, right? Mike Johnson believes, and a lot of the Republicans, they believe that this is the last generation of human civilization because they won, right? You can't get better than Mike Johnson. We might as well end the species. So even like things like supporting Israel when they absolutely hate Jews is because Israel has to be in charge of Jerusalem in order for the rapture to happen, right? That's all part of their prophecy. Jerusalem needs to be united for their rapture to happen. So even like when you talk about the truth is for them, the world is ending. So anything that gets us there is good. So even the Antichrist being president works for Mike Johnson because he's going to be right and the world will end on his watch, which means he's the winner.
So Mike, I'm told that you ran for Congress in Ohio.
I did.
Is that accurate?
I did.
When? What was election?
So in 2020, I ran in the Democratic primary again for Jim Jordan's seat.
You did,
and it was a little bit of we knew we weren't going to beat Jordan, but
yeah, you didn't have a sport jacket, so
or a history of looking away of sexual assault of young boys.
He has a bespoke congressional district that was drawn to his measurements so that only he could win.
Yeah. It's like this.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It looks like a spleen if you look at how that district is drawn.
But we had a campaign that was a massive grassroots effort. We had 300 people ready to knock on doors the day that the state was shut down for COVID. So I didn't get out of the primary. Maybe I wouldn't have anyway, but it was a good experience.
Would you do it again?
No, I'm glad I did it.
Why wouldn't you do it again?
Honestly, I work for a lot of people. I'm happy I write speeches for a lot of members of Congress now. I love doing that. We don't need more 60-something white guys in politics. I would much rather support someone smart in their 30s who can have a career for 30 years. There's no reason for me to do that,
And there's also the microscope up your ass, that you'd have to
I don't mind. I'm a comic. I don't mind that, I don't mind that. I mean,
it's good. They might catch a couple of polyps.
And you were a very clean comic too.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, I'm not considered a clean comic because I talk about religion and politics.
Yeah.
So like what they call clean comedy these days.
Yeah.
Like I can't get on Dry Bar because I won't not talk about religion, So, but whatever. So yeah, I don't swear a lot. I don't talk about sex a lot, I guess. But,
What part of Ohio? I was born in Akron, and all my family.
Okay, well, I was actually born in San Francisco, so I'm not. My wife is from here, so we live now outside. In fact, right now I'm calling from Ohio State, where I have a job writing speeches for the administration. But so we live near Ohio State. We live in Columbus.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
My father lived in Columbus,
which is the nice part of Ohio. It's like if you found a jelly bean in a sewer, you know where the jelly bean
is. There's still a funny bone in Columbus?
There is. And actually Columbus has a pretty happening little comedy scene now. There's 4 or 5 little independent 50-seat rooms, which is awesome.
Yeah, I played the funny bone there about a half a dozen times. I played the funny bone in Columbus. I remember having a really
That's a nice room, man. When it's full, it's a great room. Like
America.
Yeah, like America. All right,
Oh.
this is a good transition. You've got the right who ought to get Anthony Mackie, who is the new Captain America. African American who played the Falcon, and now if you follow the Marvel verse, of course, with Steve Rogers being old and all this stuff, he's the new Falcon. And and I got to paraphrase because I don't have the quote in front of me, but he's doing a little pre-publicity for the Captain America film that comes out, I think, sometime this spring. And he said words to the effect of America does not mean the same thing as the America in the name Captain America, because in the name Captain America, that America is not representative of what the real America is and what the real America has become.
Right.
And so the right wing is just, oh, it's another woke liberal movie. We're not going to go and see this. So they're talking about boycotting the movie. They're also out to get Selena Gomez, because Selena Gomez posted for about 5 minutes a very tearful, sympathetic video, I think on Instagram, about the mass deportations. And these are her people. Her parents were immigrants when they came here. And I think she's done a documentary on undocumented people before. So you got people on the right, including right-wing congressmen, saying she should be deported. Never mind the fact that she's a citizen. She needs to be deported. So they're now, what I find funny about this is that these are the same people who made such a big deal out of wokeness leading to people being canceled. And I'm wondering whether or not you think that cancellation is really even a thing anymore. And before you answer, think about this for a second. With the exception of Cosby, who I just don't ever see possibly working again, Louis C.K. was canceled. Now he's selling out Madison Square Garden. Kevin Spacey was canceled. Now you got Liam Neeson and Sharon Stone and others who are saying that it's time to let him out of movie jail because we need him. That's what the quote is. Mel Gibson was canceled, but Mel Gibson is back. Armie Hammer, this is the one I don't believe. 18 months ago, Armie Hammer was selling timeshares in the Bahamas. Did you know that? I think it was in People magazine. He was selling because he couldn't get work because all those tapes of him, being abusive to women, talking about cannibalism and all this stuff. Well, he's got more movie offers than he can handle right now, and he's actually turning work down. So,
with Donald Trump, he's a bad guy who did a lot of bad things, and they gave him president and they put him in office. It's just another one of those people in that list.
But he was never canceled. That's the question. They made such a big deal out of cancellation. Well, does it exist? I mean, is there such a thing anymore?
Well, what is that even? Especially in the case of like Selena Gomez or Mackie. That is different. I mean, it's so funny because it is. Donald Trump calls himself the freedom of speech president, and then they want to go after people who just say who speak their mind. But I personally always found it funny when comics complained about being canceled, because I thought the whole point of being a comic is that we had safeguards that we were supposed to tread lightly around, and we don't. We purposely cross them in order to do what we do. And we know sometimes you take the heat, sometimes it works great, but that was kind of the whole point of doing comedy.
Right.
So
that's exactly
not being canceled kind of means you're not. I mean, I have clubs that won't book me because I'm too liberal. That's kind of the point, isn't it? So
I remember when I was
has
coming
their
up.
own voice, and people will say to me, "Well, I don't like the Chappelle joke." I go, "Well, then he's not here to please you, so go watch somebody else."
Yeah.
A few people have said, Stephen Wright said, "I don't write my jokes for the audience. I write them for myself, things that make me laugh. And if the audience laughs, it's great. If they don't, that's okay."
If they don't, they don't get it.
Yeah,
Well,
that's usually what that is. And it happens a lot in the industry. So, I've learned a lot from that, and I've decided to write stuff that makes me laugh or things that, might be edgy. And if people don't like it, I always tell people, I'm not here to please you. Turn the channel, watch something else. But people should be educated to know that not everyone's going to have the same opinion. There are very dark jokes that are fantastic. and they take you to places you shouldn't go to normally in the world. But if you're doing it in the guise of satire and comedy, there's no reason to be canceled for it. It's also, this whole idea of, audiences heckling and people working the crowd instead of writing material. Like, there's very few people who are great at working the crowd. Paula Poundstone, there's like a handful. She's the greatest of all time. But there's only a few people. But now people are going out on stage without an act and just starting to attack and work the crowd and work it in a negative way. So they have each other, and then there's people in the audience. I'm going to say this and get on television and all that, and it's kind of a shame. I usually tell people, again, I'm not here to please you, or I didn't come here to, it's hard when you come to a place and you expect it to, you have a chat, and meanwhile they built a comedy club around you and fucked up your night.
Yeah.
It's funny to crowd work now. I Saturday night headline club, and I've always talked to the audience. It's just, I'm a fucking comedian. What do you want? I talk to the audience. And someone, a young comic, was like, "Wow, when did you start doing crowd work?" And it's like, I've never called it that. I'm just a comedian, and my job is to go be funny for 45 minutes, whether it's doing my stuff or talking to the people in the front row,
Yeah.
But it's like this.
Those comics that just do crowd work, I'm sorry, I just look at it as being lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and a lot of them are guys who never even tried writing jokes. They just do, and it's the stock heckler comebacks, you call the woman the slut, you call the guy fat, whatever, So
it's wrinkles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
at least
funny.
Nichols wrote that stuff.
Right. And
Well,
there are
different
comics
writers
like,
did. I've been seeing a lot of Rickles stuff that's been coming through. I guess the algorithm on Facebook for some reason sent me a lot of Carson and a lot of Rickles stuff, and probably 80% of the stuff that Rickles said then, even like in the 90s, you could not say now.
Yeah,
but he was still he got away with it. He was brilliant and he was funny and he was quick.
But because he had a soul and a heart, and you knew that behind all of that. And then there are some of the greatest comics on the planet who couldn't deal with audiences, like, Robert Schimmel. He hated talking to the crowd. Brian Regan, two of the greatest comics of all time. They didn't want to talk to the crowd. Someone would say something and they'd do mumble. Well, now I'm going to do my joke, So there's all different kinds of comics. I didn't really talk to the crowds when I was a middle act or an MC as much as I do now if I'm doing a long set. But I've only been good at it because I worked with Paula Poundstone a bunch. I worked with different people who are so good at it, and you learn to have confidence to play and let the audience step in their own shit.
Let me ask you guys this question. This is a very, very vindictive president who's leading what he promises to be a very, very vindictive administration. And I don't believe, hopefully in 4 years, we're going to get to the place where, people are being dragged out of their homes because they have spoken out against him. But he can and will do shit like Nixon did, which is sick the IRS on you and make sure you get an audit, or have the Justice Department investigate you. Even if you haven't done anything, that's still enough to bankrupt you. Are you guys concerned at all as comics? And I say this as one who's doing an anti-Trump show called The Great American Shit Show. Are you in any way, shape, or form concerned about any kind of blowback that you might get because of something that you said on stage that is critical of this administration or critical of Trump himself?
Well, I could say that I there are very few political comics who are great, like Durst and, Barry Crimmins, and there's a handful only of people that are really good. So I'm not good at political comedy, and I'm not going to pretend to be good at it or want to do it. I have it in my real life, talking about like we're doing now, or having conversation with friends and getting together and trying to, relieve the anxiety and stress. But why would I become a political comic if that's
you don't
not
have to be a political comic, Eddie, to do a joke? I mean, you're telling me you've got no joke in your act at all. that has anything to do with politics or with social policy.
I think we start worrying about that when they take Bill Burr out, because they're gonna take somebody. If they take somebody famous out, then then they'll start working their way down. But working their way like down to like club comics that are just working clubs, that's not going to happen.
Well, Lenny Bruce was the example. I mean,
Lenny Bruce was Lenny Bruce. He still had comedy albums, and he was still a name. If they're going to do
that's my point, though, is that they tried to make an example out of Lenny Bruce in order to stifle and to censor everybody else. That's
I had a local sheriff in Ohio here. Somebody contacted me and told me that I should not come back because I do a thing about we can't both get rid of the word pussy and talk honestly about the police. And talk, and it works. It's true, and it works, And I talked to you a little about the kids in my high school who became cops. They were all pussies. They were bullies. They were bullies, and
or bullied, or bullied.
Right. Someone told me that I could not come back to this coffee house because of this joke. Now, the owners of the coffee house immediately said, "Hey, we want you to come back in June and do a big show." So I feel for them, not for me, but I'm like, I appreciate this, but don't wreck your business, man. You got to protect your family,
Right, and the cops eat cookies and donuts, so So I think locally there's all these like local sheriffs who now have been empowered partly through this January 6th thing. Where I think there will be people at the local level who are punished, and I don't rely on my stand-up income. If it went away, that would not be a horrible thing. I mean, it wouldn't kill me; it would make me sad. But I think there are some younger local comics who are really trying to be edgy and smart, and political, who I think might get
or they might just move to a place where that's accepted. I mean, here's the thing: is like, red states are just they're gonna not only get redder, but they're going to get blowback on a medical level too, because of all the doctors that will eventually be leaving because they don't want to have to worry about going to jail because they're helping some woman who's having a miscarriage in an ER. At some point they're going to and I've heard it's already happening where a number of doctors are moving.
It's interesting. I'm going to stop you for a second because I was going to bring this up. I read this right before we started recording. New research from economists at Georgia Tech is showing an exodus from states that have abortion bans. The 13 states with total bans on abortion suffered a 144,000 person decline in population over the course of the last year. 144,000 people have left, and it's mostly single people. They say it's mostly single people so far. It's not families, single people who are just saying the hell with this and leaving these states. In those 13 states, you've got 80 million people residing in those 13 states with total abortion bans. And they believe that you're going to see, so the 144,000, when you're looking at 80 million, it's a minuscule amount, but they are implying that it is indicative of a trend. Do you think, Tom, that this is going to be an actual trend?
Yeah, I think one is school systems are going to get dumber. Let's be honest about that. That's what they want. They want so if you're in a red state working in a big city, those employers are going to eventually go, hey, my employees are leaving, and my workforce is like a bunch of sister and cousin effers who are, should be working a field, not applying at Johnson, Murphy and Jones law firm. So
that's unfair, because if they're second cousins, it's not the same. You really need to draw the line.
Literal line.
I was about to say that when I was cut off. Fine. But go ahead and judge, Brian.
But who is leaving, Brian, are doctors. I mean, it is a brain drain. It's why, if you were a 24-year-old, top of your class and are in medical school, why the hell would you want to stay in a state like Ohio, when you can, go someplace else where you're going to be able to practice medicine? I
Well,
mean,
it's going even farther than that. You've got tenured professors in Florida who are leaving the universities to go elsewhere because
And
of the
you
way
know, a lot of
they're-
times they'll complain. They'll say, "Well, you know, all these stars say they're going to leave America if Trump," and people are leaving America
even
because.
Longoria.
And then, but
As
a lot of
Ellen
people are not
DeGeneres.
moving away from Trump. They're moving away from Trump-run kind of states, staying in the United States, but moving to other areas in the
and
state.
isn't part of it, I know for myself anyway, I've just decided the most political thing I can do right now is raise my son and be happy and raise my kid to be happy. And so I'm doing a hell of a lot more stand up now. And like I say, I have a trans son, but he's a college freshman, an engineering student. He's an awesome kid. And, you know, it's like right now, that's my politics, is trying to, you know, but also part of it is I have no problem letting the people in their 20s and 30s run the world. It's their world. It's not my world anymore. You know?
I have grandchildren now, and
that's
my world. You know,
Yeah.
it just is. It's interesting, and the great thing is my little 14-year-old niece is, anti-Trump on her own. She just learned it on her own that there's evil and negativity coming from energy from this thing and this person, and I think the kids are mostly smart enough to know that there's a lot of people who aren't because they weren't educated well.
Well, that's what amazes me. Like someone like Joe Rogan, who has two daughters. Now, I'm not sure what their ages are, but there's going to be a point that one or maybe both of them are going to go, "Dad, what did you do?" You know, and there's a good shot of that. I mean, a 50-50 shot, especially if they're going to be well educated, and you know they will be. So, I mean, there's a good chance that his daughters will say, "Why did you vote for the guy who assaulted women, the guy who took away our right to choose and made us second-class citizens, and moved to a state that abolished our right to our own body autonomy"?
But you got 55% of white women who voted, and it went from 52 to 55% of
the women
white
that
women
voted.
of white women of white women who voted for Trump.
Yeah,
and that I don't. The three demographics I don't understand that cast that vote was the 55% of white women, the 5% of African American men under the age of 25, and the 5% of Latinos. I don't get it. African American men, especially, I don't get it, under 25, because one of the things that he has said, I've only heard Trump say it once. I haven't heard him repeat it, but I've heard him say it once. And that was he promised, if elected, he was going to give qualified immunity to all law enforcement officers so they could never be prosecuted for anything that they did under any circumstances. So if you're a black man under the age of 25, that's the sweet spot. Where you're getting
Snoop Dogg just showed up at the inauguration, man.
Oh, and he's getting all kinds of grief. They say he's getting so much grief.
Right.
And there's another one. Kanye. Kanye was supposedly going to be canceled or blackballed, and he's not. My kid's telling me yesterday. My kid's a rapper. Telling me yesterday Kanye's up $1 billion. I mean, there was an article.
In addition, you have prisons, from money. So they not only it's like when you watch The Wire and it's all about drug dealers in the neighborhood. Well, it's also about the drug dealers who are all the way at the top. The same thing in this whole thing. It's just a litany of bad people, doing bad things.
Yeah. Well, I always said,
don't we then, as entertainers and as comics, as people who use language in order to reach our audiences, have a responsibility, to be the ones who are educating the public about things that maybe they don't necessarily know about. I mean, I remember reading a thing. It's been a couple of years ago, but that you had Gen Zers and millennials were primarily getting their news from the Daily Show.
Yeah.
So don't we have a responsibility to be doing that kind of material?
I've actually heard people. Yeah, I've actually heard people say that they'd love to see Jon Stewart run for president.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and the lesson there is, people are tired of political talk. They're tired of political speech. And unfortunately, that's what Donald Trump does really well. He doesn't do political speak. And when I hear Chuck Schumer get outraged off and reading it on a piece of paper, I get pissed off because I really want him to say it from here. I don't want him to read it from a piece of paper. I want you to be genuine in the moment. Don't worry if you flub a word, or don't worry if you say something you didn't intend to say. Say it earnestly and honestly and vehemently, be real and genuine, and stop texting me for money.
Right.
Yeah, explain
Well,
that. Why am I continuing to get solicitations from Kamala for asking for money?
You gotta delete those, man.
I get like one a day.
Yeah.
I'm getting one a day. I'm not kidding.
I've started stop.
That's right. I put stop, and I support these people, but it's like,
Me
also,
too.
I know where you are when I'm ready to give you money. You don't gotta ask. I know where you are.
Yeah, Chuck Schumer is going to do a stop the king bill. Give him $20. I don't, You know what? You don't have the majority anymore. I'm not going to give you. What am I, a cash machine?
And
and
the New Yorker, Chuck Schumer has very little, play as far. We don't really respect the kind of guy he is, or the kind of political. He's never been the kind of person we need. I'm very arrogant about New York. People say, "Where in America you live?" And I go, "I don't live in America. I live in New York." Because it's really arrogant to say that, but I believe that. I wish we could separate ourselves from, because mostly people in New York know Trump, have lived with Trump, and know that he's a communist.
Can't stand him.
Right, of course. I worked for him in a sense at his golf courses, and the people
I worked for him in Atlantic City. I worked for him at the Taj a number of times. I worked for him.
I worked in this golf course, and the night after the show, all the staff were telling me these horrible stories about him, sexually molesting people, and many, many stories, that. But the whole thing about about being a New Yorker and having Chuck Schumer be the guy. I'd rather have AOC because she's coming there. She's passionate about it.
Yeah.
And I don't always have to agree with her, but I don't have to agree with everybody.
She can't win.
She's genuine. Yeah. I just want, let's just start with, we need to start coming from a genuine, real, honest place instead of all these speeches and worried about everybody else. You don't have to get everything 100% right. Two things can be honest and real in the same time. We can
You're talking about comedians. That's what comedians do. They tell the truth. They're authentic. They are stand up.
And I think that's one of the attractions that Trump had.
The good ones do break through. And then I think you talked about role model. I think my responsibility to an audience is to be an authentic version of myself. I say stupid things because I find them funny. I say smart things because I find them funny. But the only unifying fact in my act is it makes me laugh. It's kind of like what Eddie said. I write because I think it's funny. And the definition of funny is I think it's funny, whether anyone does.
Exactly.
You've got to write for yourself. You've got to write for yourself.
But I think that's
you can't write a joke
I might have on someone is to encourage them to do the same in their own life, is just be you, man, especially when you reach a certain age. If you're 40 and you're still worrying about living up to mom and dad standards or something, you're doing it wrong.
Well, okay, now here's something. Let me stop you. Let me stop you for just a quick second. I do want to throw this in. Last night, I saw that the first 3 parts of the Vince McMahon documentary series that they've got on Netflix. Have any of you guys seen any of this yet? No. I highly recommend it. I've not been around. I mean, I watched wrestling for like 5 minutes when my kids were young and were really into it. And my son says, "You got to watch this. You got to watch this." And this guy's Trump. I mean, the comparisons in terms of both of them having fathers in the same industry who were giants, both of them never feeling like they lived up to what it was that their fathers wanted them to be, wanted them to do. So they've got to outdo the old man. Both of them have fathers who are dead, and they're still trying to prove themselves to their dead fathers today. Both of them.
The good news is I don't have to see it now because you just told me. I was like, thank God I didn't see it.
Well, it's entertaining as as hell. It really is entertaining as hell, and it explains a lot. The crap that Vince McMahon did to get people to look at me, look at my WWF instead of WCF or whatever it is.
Right.
It's the same kind of crap. It's different, realms. One's wrestling, one's real estate, but they were the same. It's the same story. But I'm I guess at 6 parts. I'm 3 parts in, and I reluctantly watched the first part. And 20 minutes I was in.
Yeah.
20 minutes into what I was in.
Well, the thing I was going to say was about advertising. We've been told our whole lives that we're pieces of shit. No one's going to have sex with you because you have gray hair. No one's going to have sex with you at pimples. You're a piece of shit, but we have the product that's going to make you better. You're a sinner. You learn that from growing up as a kid, and you get all this stuff piled up on you, how no good you are and how you're not worthy. And the key for me to be a better comic, better human, is to get rid of that little by little until it's gone. And then I find the authentic self within. But that's how politics works as well. They use it like advertising. Like one thing about Trump and Kamala, he would say, Kamala's the worst vice president we've had in the history of the world. How can you tell if she's the worst? There's no vice president, it's just bullshit.
Name 5. Name 5 vice presidents in the history of the country. Name 5.
She's the worst in the history. And well, what makes her good? What makes her bad? She's a vice president. There was another man who's a vice president there. Walter Mondale. What did he do?
Yeah,
he sat around and waited, and nobody died, so he went home.
So he went to a funeral of a foreign dignitary.
Yeah. So what Trump is doing is this advertising. She's the worst vice president, and people are like, well, she must be the worst because he said it 10,000 times, and in reality, he's just advertising and piling shit up on top of us.
But authenticity, even though Trump's a con man, he is authentic to who he is, right? He's an open con man. I like a guy like Pete Buttigieg, who politically is further to the right than I am as a Democrat, but he comes across so damn authentic that I would follow him. I would gladly go along and say, all right, we're not going to agree on everything.
And so does Gavin.
Gavin does too. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you who else. I'll tell you who's the best of that, and who, somebody who personally I just happen to love. He's loved or he's hated. Personally, I love the man, and that's Willie Brown.
I love it.
And in terms of somebody who is completely and totally authentic, there was a story when he was running for re-election for mayor of San Francisco. This has got to be in the early 90s. And there was and I cannot remember what the scandal was, but it was a front page San Francisco Chronicle scandal where it had something to do with giving city contracts, and he got somebody who was a friend of his a job, or I don't remember exactly what the specifics of it were. So I have him on. I was doing a radio show at the time for the ABC affiliate, and I had him on, and I said, Willie, who is so-and-so? He goes, he's a friend of mine. I said, Willie, did you get him a government job? He goes, of course I did. What kind of a friend will Willie Brown be if Willie Brown didn't get jobs for his friends? So it's like, okay, now where do I go from there? If he'd have lied and said, well, I didn't really get him a job, I introduced him. No, of course I did.
That's one of the perks of being mayor or fill in the blank.
Right. Yeah. Tom, when I would come to work Cobb's, he sent me for Girbaud jeans. I'll never forget it. And I had never heard of them. And I went to the store, and there was Willie Brown. It was me and Willie Brown. And I spent 45 minutes in the store, just telling me one great story after another. And I didn't know who he was. I'm a New Yorker. I'm in San Francisco. And at the end, they go, do you know who you were talking to? And I go, some great guy who just let it all hang out. He goes, that's the mayor. It's like, oh my God. Now we walked both out with our Girbaud jeans and
he's 80 something years old, and when I bump into him, he's still as sharp and still as funny. And the whole thing. Well, it was Will Durst you mentioned earlier, who, in my opinion, is the greatest political comic I have ever met. Now, I've seen plenty, and there are legendary ones, Mort Solon is Haiti and so forth. But in terms of I've ever met in my career is Durst, and Durst's line about Willie Brown is that he's the only person who can go into a revolving door behind you and come out in front of you. And that sums it up.
Yeah.
That sums it up.
That's
But there
pretty
is something
great.
to be said for authenticity, and there's something to be said. I mean, the thing that just again that boggles the mind is just how cowardly, how spineless some of these people are. I'm looking at for a perfect example of this. I was reading a piece about Ted Cruz today, and when Ted Cruz ran for the Republican nomination, when he was running against Trump, Trump said that his wife was ugly.
You're right.
He said his wife was ugly and his dad killed Kennedy.
And then
now,
Cruz said, "How high?"
yeah, and now he carries water for the guy. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, the guy. If somebody says your wife's ugly, you punch him in the mouth.
Yeah, he's out.
You know,
Rubio, the same.
Yeah, well,
remember Trump gave out Lindsey Graham's home phone number. Remember?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And
Yes.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the hell happened to him? You know, John McCain is doing donuts in his grave for having been
You would
friends with
think
him.
you would think these guys are like they're like $1 away from bankruptcy. You know, it's sort of like, aren't you like set? Don't you?
Right.
What are you worried about? What do you need that you have to grovel so pathetically? I mean, it's really embarrassing. I mean, I can't even imagine me being in a situation like that where I would take that kind of abuse without saying, you know what, I don't care what you can do for me or do to me.
Right.
I'm going to hit you with this hammer.
Yeah,
I had trouble sucking up. I had trouble sucking
Nice
up
of you
the
to
club
warn him.
owners, let alone even like the comedy dance of like people who were and were so good with the business of comedy and and I could never even do that. And
well, here's how I think of it. Well, here's what I think part of the reason is, and that is that men, and you're primarily talking about middle-aged men. And for men, but especially middle-aged men, their jobs, our jobs, are a big part of our identity, of who it is that we are. And when you lose that job, then it's like, who am I? It turns into a midlife crisis. And that's why they'll hold on to it for as long as they can, as tightly as they can, because without it, they have no identity. And again, that's armchair psychoanalysis, but that's how I look at
right.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were Dr. Brian Copeland.
There is a Dr. Brian Copeland. You know that? There is.
Yeah.
Google.
Stuart Copeland.
Yeah.
Copeland.
Well, and being a senator is a really good gig. You don't want to give that up. I mean, people really, really treat you nicely when you're a senator. So it's not like any job to hang on to, but.
So listen, guys. So we're running out of time. So, but before we go, a couple of quick things I wanted to get to. This, as I mentioned, this is the 200th episode of this podcast, and I just started it to start it. I was bitching and moaning all the time. I left radio and was bitching and moaning. My daughter said, "Just get a podcast on. I don't have to listen to you anymore." So we started it, and 2 weeks into it, the pandemic hit, so we figured out we'll do it over Zoom, and here we are. God, 5 years later, 4 years later, 5 years later, and 200 episodes in. Now, reason I bring this up is that this started in 2020, right before the pandemic. And one of the things that the Trump administration or Trump campaign did last year was ask the Reagan question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And 4 years before last year was 2020, the year of the shutdown. And apparently, based on the results, a lot of Americans, most American voters said yes. Apparently, they thought they were better off in 2020. So my question for the three of you is this. Tell me about your 2020. Were you at home making shitty sourdough bread? What was your 2020 like?
Well, I could tell you on March 14th, I was at Dangerfield, and there were 4 people in the audience who didn't give a shit that there was a pandemic. And 2 of the people were from the audience before. So I had to the 4 of them. And I walked home and took the subway, and the subway actually took like 25 minutes, where it's normally every 3 minutes. And it was very eerie. It was the last, and we didn't know if we were going to shake each other's hands, the MC and the comics and the microphone and touching. And so many amazing things were about to happen for me. And then a shutdown, all producing comedy specials, live experiences, stand up. So, and then it just kind of sucked. I got COVID, and it was really messed me up really badly. And I hated performing on, on this kind of thing, trying to do stand up in this format. So it just got worse and worse. And now I feel like, despite the shit in the presidency, I have a better attitude than I did 4 years ago. And now I'm taking, I've been able to produce specials. I'm doing stand up a lot more. And so I think I'm better now than I was 4 years ago in 2020.
Hey, Mike, you were running for Congress.
2020, I started the year running for Congress. Over the course, I ended the year finally quitting drinking after 50 years of loving every drop of it. I enjoyed every bit of it. But in the meantime, there I had a kid who had a suicide attempt. We found out that late came out that they were trans, and so it was a hectic year. And yet, I'm sure glad for it. Things are a lot better now. But if I can go for a bit just on the idea of what's better, my best years in my life were when George Bush was president, just because that was when I was in my 40s and I had my overall deal at 20th and I was raking in the dough and writing on shows. So sometimes what we consider who's better off isn't necessarily who's better off politically. I mean, when Obama, who's my favorite president, those were kind of crappy years for me financially. So, yeah, I don't know when people say, "Are you better off?" Like, how do you mean? Right.
Tom, you're 2020.
Yeah. I basically, delved a little deeper in my music collection and my film collection, and became a real big power pop enthusiast. And
that's my boy.
Yeah, we've got 4 cats and a dog, and it was I didn't mind it at all, to be honest with you. And it was like the only thing that I wish I did differently was I had quit golf for a little while, and that would have been the greatest time to golf during the pandemic. Yeah, golfers really are isolating all the time anyways. I'm in the trees over there, you're in the bushes over there. So it would have been.
You were in the Gulf of America.
But now I'm back into golf really heavily. So no, I think, you know what? I think the only thing sad about life in some ways is that you should, at least, I don't see this from everybody, but I feel like I get wiser and wiser and wiser, and I become a better and better person as I get older. And, and I know eventually it ends because, I looked at another cat and I went, oh, that's going to live for X amount of years. I'm going to live for X amount of years. One of these things isn't like the other. So, so I think that's the I love being as smart as I am. I just wish it was at least in my 50-year-old body.
Yeah. I hear you. I mean, if you could go back, the question I always ask, and that is, if you could take everything that you know now and be 16 years old again, but know everything you know now, would you do it?
Yeah.
Because most people say,
you guys would have so much better luck with girls. Oh my God. If I knew that they like guys with a sense of humor. I didn't learn that till I was 30.
And plus in a couple of years I'd be really going after the hot middle-aged ladies. Hard. You're not gonna believe this is gonna sound like a story, but actually I'm a 66-year-old guy in this 18-year-old guy's body. So hang on to your hat, sister. Let's talk about Tantra.
Oh my God. Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys all being. Actually, I do want to end with this. I forgot that we're gonna start a benchmark. We're gonna start a new thing since this is the 200th show, and that is quickly. Tell me what you learned in the last hour. Tell me what you learned. Nothing. Not a goddamn thing. None of you.
I didn't learn anything. It just
you learned nothing.
I learned that the people that I respect and I work around with, are like-minded, and I'm happy to be in that group of people.
Yeah.
I am going to learn something after this because I'm going to go look up what power pop is.
Power Pop's awesome.
Yeah,
It's
it
the
really is.
raspberries, Badfinger.
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah.
the early.
All
I
the
love the raspberries.
way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Okay.
And there are so many new power pop bands. Like each decade, power pop never stopped. I mean,
Oh, all right.
It's
amazing.
Probably
Right.
music I already listened to. I just don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
Power pop. It never stops. Never stops.
All right, well, here's to another 200 episodes. Thanks again. I hope you guys will come back and be it's your first time on
a pleasure.
on the podcast.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
I'm glad
Great
to have you.
seeing
Thank
you.
you for doing it.
Absolutely.
Bye, guys.
All right.
All right.
See you.
Take care.